Imagine understanding every single word that is spoken to you, you know? You have this really rich inner life.
Yeah, a sharp sense of humor.
Right. Distinct preferences and this deep, just overwhelming love for your family.
But then when you try to actually express any of that,
Exactly. When you try to, I don't know, tell a joke or say that your stomach hurts or just say, I love you.
the vocal cords simply refuse to play the music that's in your head.
Yeah, it's like the signals just get lost in the wires. And, for the families of children worldwide diagnosed with PURA syndrome, this isn't some philosophical thought experiment.
No, not at all. It's daily life. It is the reality of
Yeah.
living with this profound receptive-expressive gap.
I want to warmly welcome you to this custom-tailored deep dive for the PURA syndrome podcast. If you're listening to this, you are likely a parent, a carer, or a family member of a child with PURA syndrome.
And we see you. We really do.
We know that raising a child with an ultra-rare genetic condition, and we are talking about a condition with fewer than 800 confirmed cases globally since it was first discovered back in, 2014?
Yeah, 2014. It's incredibly rare.
Right. So navigating that is a journey that, well, it often feels like navigating a vast ocean without a map. You're essentially pioneers in a medical landscape that is still actively being written.
And the isolation that comes with a diagnosis that rare, it's something we really want to acknowledge right out of the gate.
Absolutely.
Because when you walk into a typical pediatrician's office, you are often the one educating the doctor about your child's condition.
Which is wild to think about.
It's an immense burden to carry.
It really is. Which brings us to our specific mission for today's deep dive. We're calling it Finding Their Voice. Introduction to AAC.
Yes.
We are going to explore a concept that is absolutely critical to your child's journey, which is this undeniable fact that nonverbal does not mean nothing to say.
That distinction, separating intelligence from articulation, that's the absolute cornerstone of everything we're going to discuss today.
So to get to the bottom of this, we are drawing on a really comprehensive stack of sources.
Some great material.
Yeah, we have clinical guidelines directly from the PURA Syndrome Foundation. We've got the latest genomic research, neurological studies on the PURA gene.
The Clarity Health Library insights on speech therapy and funding are in there too.
Yes, very practical stuff. And most importantly, I think, we have real quotes, anecdotes, and lived experiences from PURA families.
Because the clinical data, it's crucial, but it only gives us the mechanics.
Right. It tells us the what.
Exactly. It's the families, the daily caregivers, who tell us the how and the why. They're the ones actually bridging this gap every single day.
Okay, let's unpack this, because when I was reading through the source material, one overarching reality became incredibly clear.
The lack of expressive language.
Yeah. The vast majority of individuals with PRA syndrome are non-speaking. Many will never develop meaningful, expressive verbal language.
Right.
And yet the clinical literature and the parents consistently, almost universally, report that these same individuals possess a deep, vibrant understanding of the world around them.
They are in there. They are processing everything.
They really are. So
Yeah.
Our primary goal today is to figure out how to bridge that massive canyon between your child's internal comprehension, which is rich and active, and their outward expression.
And the bridge we use to cross that canyon is augmentative and alternative communication, or AC.
AAC. But before we start building that bridge, we have to deeply understand the canyon itself. We need to talk about the biology of the trapped voice.
This is so important.
What is actually happening in the body of a child with PRA syndrome that creates this incredible discrepancy between what they know and what they can say?
Well, to understand that, we have to zoom all the way in, down to the molecular level.
Okay, let's do it.
So PURA syndrome is caused by a mutation, or a variance, in the PURA gene. Now, let's think of the brain as an incredibly complex, bustling city.
A city that's trying to build its infrastructure during early childhood, right?
Exactly. And in order to build roads and bridges, which in the brain are the neural pathways and dendrites, the construction workers need blueprints.
And the DNA holds those blueprints.
Right. But the DNA is locked away in the nucleus, the central library of the cell. It can't leave.
Oh, I see.
So it makes copies of the blueprints called mRNA. Now, here is where the PURA gene comes in.
Okay.
The PURA gene provides the instructions for making a specific protein called Pur-alpha.
Pur-alpha.
You can think of the Pur-alpha protein as the brain's specialized molecular postal service.
Okay, Postal Service.
Its entire job is to bind to those mRNA prints, pick them up, and physically transport them out of the library and into the dendrites of the neurons where the construction is actually happening.
So it's literally the delivery system for the instructions needed to build and mature those neural connections.
It's totally essential for it. It's required for local protein synthesis, which is how synaptic plasticity, memory formation, and, crucially, motor control pathways are built.
Wow.
So when a child has what geneticists call a heterozygous pathogenic variant on chromosome 5 at the 5q31.3 locus.
Which is the specific address of the PURA gene.
Yes, it means one of their 2 copies of this gene just isn't working properly.
So the body simply doesn't have enough functional Pur-alpha protein.
Exactly. The Postal Service slows down drastically.
The construction workers are just, what, standing around waiting for the blueprints?
Right. So the infrastructure doesn't get built the way it should. The dendrites don't mature properly.
And what's the result of that?
Well, one of the most immediate, profound physical results of this slowed infrastructure development is severe central hypotonia.
Let's break down that term, because it's something every single PURA parent hears from day one in the NICU.
Yes, they do.
Hypotonia meaning extremely low muscle tone. It's that floppy baby presentation.
The word central is the crucial part of that diagnosis, though.
Really? Why central?
Because the problem isn't actually in the muscles themselves. If a doctor were to do a muscle biopsy on a child with PURA syndrome, the muscle tissue itself would look structurally fine.
Wait, really? The muscles are fine.
They are.
Yeah.
The issue is central, meaning it originates in the brain and the central nervous system.
Oh, wow.
The brain, because of that delayed neural infrastructure, isn't sending the appropriate sustained electrical signals to tell the muscles to maintain their resting tension.
This is where the mechanics of speech started to really make sense to me. Let me try an analogy here based on what the sources are describing.
Go for it.
Imagine you have a highly sophisticated, top-of-the-line stereo system. That stereo is the brain.
Okay.
The internal computer of that stereo is reading the digital music file perfectly. The data is there, the rhythm is understood, the melody is completely processed.
But the output?
Exactly. The physical speaker wires connecting the receiver to the actual speakers are frayed. The voltage traveling down those wires is just too low.
That's a great way to picture it.
So the physical speakers, which in the human body are the muscles of the diaphragm, the vocal cords, the tongue, the lips, the jaw, they just don't have the electrical tone or the physical coordination required to actually play the sound out loud.
That analogy perfectly encapsulates the receptive-expressive gap. The music is playing beautifully in their mind.
Yeah.
The cognitive machinery is intact enough to understand the song, to feel the emotion of it. But the mechanical output is entirely compromised by that central hypotonia.
The frayed wires simply can't carry the signal to the speakers.
Right. It's a physical mechanical barrier, not an intellectual blank slate.
And this distinction is vital, isn't it, in a clinical setting and, frankly, in an educational setting, too.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
We have to ruthlessly differentiate between the physical ability to produce speech and the cognitive ability to understand language.
Because they get conflated all the time.
Constantly. When severe central hypotonia affects the muscles of speech, we see a condition called dysarthria. Yes. It means the muscles you use for speech are weak, or you have extreme difficulty controlling them. This makes speech sound slow, slurred, incredibly breathy. Or, in the case of severe PURA syndrome, it prevents articulated speech entirely.
This also directly ties into why these infants have such severe feeding and swallowing difficulties, right? The dysphagia.
It's the exact same mechanism.
It's the same muscle groups, the mouth, the throat, the esophagus, failing to get the right electrical signals to coordinate a swallow.
Exactly. The oropharyngeal hypotonia impacts the complex suck-swallow-breathe coordination just as heavily as it impacts the ability to form a word.
It makes so much sense.
Think about the micro-movements required just to say the word cat.
Just one small word.
Right. The back of the tongue has to raise to the soft palate, then drop, then the vocal cords engage, then the tip of the tongue has to hit the alveolar ridge behind the teeth, all while coordinating a specific burst of breath.
I'm trying to do it now, and you don't even think about it.
It is an Olympic-level gymnastic routine for the muscles. If you have central hypotonia, that routine is physically impossible.
Yeah.
But again, dysarthria and apraxia of speech are motor disorders. They are not disorders of intelligence, and they are not disorders of comprehension.
And that leads to the ultimate aha moment in the clinical text regarding PURA syndrome. Time and time again, the literature highlights this massive discrepancy between receptive language, what the child understands, and expressive language, what they can say.
We aren't just talking about a slight speech delay here.
No.
We are talking about children who might not be able to articulate a single, clear, recognizable word, yet they can follow multi-step spoken commands.
They know exactly what is going on around them, who is in the room, what the routine is.
Yes, precisely.
There is an incredibly powerful anecdote in the source material that illustrates this reality beautifully. It's about a 14-year-old boy named Aiden who has PURA syndrome.
I love this quote.
Yeah, his parent is quoted as saying, and I want to read this exactly as it appears. I have learned from Aiden that being nonverbal is not the same thing as not being able to communicate. We've learned new ways of being in the world with Aiden so that he can live life more fully.
That lived experience captures the absolute essence of what we are dealing with.
It really does.
What's fascinating here is how the clinical guidelines and the parents universally report that individuals with PURA are incredibly social beings.
Yes. They're described over and over as friendly, affectionate, deeply observant, empathetic.
If your child is nonverbal but socially engaged, if they're making purposeful eye contact, responding emotionally to a sad song or a funny face, reaching out for affection.
That's proof, right?
It is undeniable scientific proof that the cognitive wheels are constantly turning.
They are listening to the world. They are feeling the atmosphere of a room. They are forming complex opinions about what they like and dislike.
The music is playing in the stereo.
Right. So our job as clinicians, as educators, and as parents is not to force the broken speaker to work in a way it biologically cannot.
Exactly. If the wires are frayed, you don't just keep turning the volume knob up and getting frustrated when there's no sound.
That's a great point.
Our job is to give them a completely different way to output the music.
So if the physical muscles of speech are impaired by the central hypotonia, how do we bypass those frayed speaker wires?
That is where we introduce augmentative and alternative communication.
AAC.
Okay, let's get into the solutions.
Yeah.
Because AAC is a pretty broad umbrella term, isn't it?
It is. It encompasses any tool, any system, or any strategy that helps a person communicate when they cannot rely on natural verbal speech.
And I want to be very clear about something that often worries parents. Using AAC is not giving up on spoken language.
Oh, absolutely not. The research is definitive on this. ATC does not hinder speech development. In fact, it often encourages it by reducing frustration and building the neurological pathways for language. It's about providing a reliable, immediate method of expression instead of waiting for verbal speech to emerge.
Exactly.
Let's break down how this actually works, starting from the ground up. The Clarity Health sources outline several low-tech AC tools.
Right. The low-tech options.
These are systems that don't require batteries, screens, or electricity. What does a low-tech intervention actually look like in practice for a child with PURA?
It generally starts with the absolute basics of human connection and physical movement. The first tier is manual signing.
Like sign language?
Well, we aren't necessarily talking about complex, grammatically complete sign languages like American Sign Language or British Sign Language.
Oh man.
Because those languages require intense fine motor dexterity and rapid sequencing. For a child with hypotonia, that's often out of reach. Instead, we look at simplified gestures, sometimes referred to as keyword sign.
So using a core vocabulary of essential signs.
Yes. Signs like more, finished, eat, drink, or help. And these physical signs are always paired with spoken words by the parent or therapist to reinforce the meaning.
It's about giving them a functional, physical vocabulary that requires gross motor movement rather than the micromotor movements of the mouth.
Exactly. It's a great entry point.
That makes sense as a starting point. But what happens when a child's world expands? What if they need to communicate something far more specific?
Like wanting to watch a particular movie.
Right, or if their hypotonia makes even simplified signing too difficult.
That's where the transition to physical communication boards happens.
What do those look like?
These are literally laminated boards or binders filled with grids of images, symbols, or written words. A child can point to a picture of a cup to say they are thirsty, or point to a picture of their bed to say they are tired.
The sources specifically focus on a system called PECS, the Picture Exchange Communication System.
Yes, PECS is very common.
From reading the literature, it seems PECS isn't just a board you point at, it's an entire cognitive training program.
It really is. PECS is highly structured and incredibly effective because it addresses the psychology of communication. It doesn't just teach a child to point at a static board.
What does it do?
It teaches the fundamental concept of communication as an intentional exchange between two people.
How does that actually work in a therapy session or, at the kitchen table?
Well, think about the cognitive leap required here. The child has to understand that a two-dimensional line drawing of an apple represents the physical three-dimensional apple they want to eat.
That is a big leap. Symbolic cognitive mapping.
Exactly. In the first phase of PECS, the child learns to physically pick up that picture card, which usually has Velcro on the back, reach across a table, and hand it to a communication partner.
And then what?
The partner immediately hands them the real apple.
Oh, I see.
They learn, if I hand you this symbol, I get this result. It establishes the cause and effect of language.
That's brilliant.
And over time, as they move through the phases of PECS, they learn to string pictures together on a sentence strip. They place a card that means I want next to the card for apple and hand over the whole strip.
It's building the architecture of grammar without requiring a single spoken word.
Exactly.
And then the sources detail PODD books. Pragmatic Organization Dynamic Display.
Yes, PODD books are another excellent tool.
There's another specific anecdote in the clinical text about a young girl named Sarah. The text notes that Sarah has great receptive language skills, but can only say the occasional word.
Right.
So her therapists are working with her using a PODD communication book, and it's reported that she absolutely loves using it to express herself.
PODD is a fantastic low-tech system because it's organized by pragmatics, which means the social use of language.
How is that different from a regular board?
Most communication boards are organized by categories. All the food is on one page, all the toys on another, but human conversation doesn't work like that.
True, we don't just list foods.
Exactly. We make requests, we complain, we tell jokes. PODD has a specific vocabulary layout, a branching logic that helps the user navigate through pages to quickly find the words they need to initiate a conversation, tell a story, or express a feeling.
It's a very robust, comprehensive language system inside a physical binder.
It really is.
Okay, I want to pause here and really challenge this, though, because I'm thinking about the physical reality of PURA syndrome that we just established.
Okay, let's hear it.
We know from the medical characteristics that these children have severe central hypotonia. The sources state they have significant gross and fine motor delays.
Yes, that's correct.
We also know that many have dyskinesia, which are those sudden, involuntary, uncoordinated muscle movements.
Right.
So if your child cannot easily isolate an index finger to point, or if they don't have the pincer grasp required to peel a Velcro PECS card off a board, or if an involuntary movement constantly knocks the PODD book off their lap.
I see where you're going.
Aren't these low-tech tools going to be incredibly frustrating for them? Aren't we just replacing a vocal physical barrier with a manual physical barrier? If the speaker wires to the mouth are frayed, the wires to the hands are often frayed too.
That is a phenomenal critical pushback, and it highlights the exact daily friction that parents and therapists face when managing this condition.
It just seems like it would be exhausting.
Your assessment is completely accurate. For a child with profound hypotonia and dyskinesia, trying to precisely point to a 1-inch square on a crowded laminated communication board can be a Herculean task.
Yeah.
It can be physically draining and lead to immense frustration. Imagine knowing exactly what you want to say, seeing the picture of it right in front of you, but your hands simply won't cooperate to point at it. It is maddening.
So if it's that physically demanding and potentially that frustrating, why do the clinical guidelines recommend starting with them? Why put a child through that?
Because AAC is a developmental journey, and low-tech tools are an essential proving ground.
Proving ground.
Yes.
Yeah.
They're highly accessible, they are affordable, they don't break if you drop them, and they never run out of battery. More importantly, they are the most tangible way to introduce that cognitive concept of symbolic communication. We have to teach the brain that a picture holds power.
Okay, I get that.
But your point is exactly why the multidisciplinary team has to remain hypervigilant. If a speech-language pathologist or a parent sees that Aiden or Sarah clearly understands the PECS card, looks at it, wants it, but simply cannot physically hand it over without exhaustion.
That's a trigger.
That is the trigger. The physical limitations of low tech are exactly what necessitate the transition to more advanced technologies.
So if the manual boards are physically exhausting the child to the point of tears or disengagement, the team has to digitize the environment.
Exactly.
Here's where it gets really interesting. Let's move into the digital realm and explore the high-tech AAC options detailed in the sources.
High-tech AAC completely alters the landscape for individuals with severe physical motor limitations. It is designed to remove the need for fine motor dexterity and replace it with technology that bridges that specific physical gap. It takes the heavy lifting off the child's muscles and puts it onto a computer processor.
Wow. The sources point to tablet-based apps as the most common entry point into high-tech. We are talking about iPads or Android tablets loaded with specialized software.
Right. These apps utilize what we call dynamic displays, which solves the clunkiness of a physical PODD book.
Because you don't have to turn the pages.
Exactly. Instead of physically turning heavy pages, the child touches a folder icon on the screen, say, a picture of a refrigerator for food.
And the screen immediately instantly refreshes to show a new grid filled with food options.
Yes. And the most crucial element of high-tech AAC is the auditory output. When the child selects the icon, the tablet speaks the word out loud using text-to-speech software.
That immediate auditory feedback must be huge for their learning. They press the apple, the machine says apple, and the brain wires that connection.
It's incredibly powerful reinforcement.
But even a tablet requires some ability to touch a screen. If a child's hypotonia is so severe or their involuntary dyskinetic movements are so disruptive that they can't accurately tap a specific icon on glass, what then?
That's a very common scenario.
The sources mention dedicated speech-generating devices, or SGDs. How are these different from just buying an iPad?
Well, an iPad is a consumer electronic device. A dedicated SGD is a highly specialized medical device.
Okay.
They are built for the reality of significant physical disability. They are rugged, they have powerful speakers designed to be heard in a noisy classroom or a grocery store.
Because an iPad isn't very loud.
Right. But most importantly, they offer alternative access methods. If a child cannot use their hands to touch a screen, an FGD allows us to bypass the hands entirely.
How does that work? How do you select a button without touching it?
One method is switch scanning. We can place a switch, which is essentially a large, highly sensitive button near any part of the child's body that they can reliably, consistently control.
Like their head.
It might be next to their head, under their knee, or by their elbow. The SGD software automatically scans through the options on the screen, highlighting each row one by one.
Okay, I'm picturing it.
When the row containing the word the child wants is highlighted, they tap the switch with their head. Then it scans the individual buttons in that row. When it lands on Apple, they tap the switch again. The device speaks.
That is incredible problem solving. It isolates whatever minimal motor control they have and weaponizes it for communication.
It's brilliant. But the absolute ultimate game changer mentioned in the medical literature, specifically for patients who are profoundly locked in by motor impairment, is advanced eye tracking technology.
Eye gaze technology.
Yes, it is nothing short of revolutionary in the field of neurodevelopmental disorders. It completely bypasses the need for the hands, the arms, the legs, or even gross head control.
So what does it rely on?
It relies on the only muscles the child might have reliable control over, the ocular muscles.
How does it actually work? It sounds like science fiction.
It uses incredible infrared technology. The SGD has small infrared cameras built into the bottom of the screen. These cameras constantly emit invisible infrared light, which reflects off the corneas of the user's eyes.
Okay, so it's tracking the reflection.
Exactly. The cameras track that reflection to precisely calculate exactly where on the screen the child is looking.
That's wild. And how do they actually select something?
To make a selection, the child simply looks at an icon, say the button for play music, for a set amount of time. This is called the dwell time, and it can be adjusted down to fractions of a second.
Oh, wow.
If they hold their gaze on that button for the required dwell time, the system registers it, just like a mouse click. It speaks the word.
So they are literally speaking with their eyes. They can build sentences, ask questions, tell a parent they love them just by looking at a screen.
It gives a powerful, articulate voice to those who are completely physically locked in. It is life-altering technology.
However, and this is a massive, critical however, based on the extra neurological medical data in our sources.
I think I know what you're going to say.
If we are going to rely on a child's eyes to be their voice, their eyes have to be working properly.
The implication there is huge, and it is where we see a lot of AAC implementation fail if the medical team isn't looking at the whole picture.
Because if we connect this to the bigger picture, the clinical literature on PURA syndrome tells us that the vast majority of PURA patients have significant visual impairments.
Yes, this is not a secondary concern. It is a primary, non-negotiable point of care.
The sources specifically mention strabismus, which is crossed eyes or eyes that do not align properly, and severe refractive errors like myopia, which is extreme short-sightedness.
We also frequently see nystagmus, which are rapid, uncoordinated, jumpy eye movements.
Right.
Now, think about the mechanics of the eye gaze device we just discussed. The infrared camera is looking for a steady, predictable reflection from the pupil to calibrate the screen.
So if the child has strabismus.
If the child has strabismus, and their eyes are pointing in slightly different directions, the camera gets confused. It doesn't know which eye to track, so the cursor jumps wildly around the screen.
And what if they have myopia?
If the child has untreated myopia, the symbols on the screen are a blurry, unreadable mess. They aren't going to look at a symbol they can't cognitively identify because it's out of focus.
If you are a parent or a carer listening to this right now, this is perhaps the most actionable, vital piece of advice in this entire deep dive.
Absolutely.
You cannot use visual AAC if the visual input is compromised.
Before you spend months fighting insurance for a $15,000 eye gaze system, or even before you get frustrated that your child isn't looking at their low-tech PECS board, you must have an ophthalmologist or a neuro-ophthalmologist evaluate their vision.
Early and regular ophthalmologic exams are absolutely mandatory.
Correcting those refractive errors with specialized glasses or surgically managing the strabismus early on is not just about helping them see the television.
No. It is literally the physical prerequisite for giving them a voice. The eye care specialist is a fundamental core member of the speech therapy team.
That holistic view is essential. It shows how every single system in the body is linked in this journey. You can't treat the speech delay without treating the vision, and you can't treat the vision without understanding the hypotonia.
So, assuming the vision is corrected or being managed, how does a family actually choose the right tool? The transition from a child being completely nonverbal to effectively navigating a high-tech SGD isn't just ordering something off the internet and flipping a switch.
It is a highly tailored, deeply complex process of implementation that takes months, if not years, of trial and error.
What are the factors they have to consider?
Choosing the tool requires a synthesis of several complex factors. First, as we've discussed at length, are the physical motor skills. Can they point?
Right.
If they can point, do they need a physical plastic keyguard over the tablet screen to prevent their dyskinesia from causing accidental button presses? Do they need physical switches, or do they need eye tracking?
And the second factor is the cognitive layout.
Yes, the cognitive load. Does the child respond better to simple, high-contrast photographs of real objects in their actual house, like a picture of their specific favorite cup? Or can they understand abstract line drawings and universal symbols?
Like deciding how many buttons to put on the screen.
Exactly. Can their visual processing handle a screen with 60 small buttons? Or do they need a screen with just 4 large buttons to avoid becoming completely overwhelmed and shutting down?
And let's be incredibly real here. The third factor, which dictates so much of this reality, is the budget and the healthcare bureaucracy.
The funding. It's a huge hurdle.
The Clarity Health Library sources point out that AAC devices, especially high-tech dedicated medical SGDs with eye tracking, can be astronomically expensive. Families are forced to navigate labyrinthine funding systems.
It is a full-time job for many parents. Depending on where you live, you are navigating the NDIS in Australia, fighting for NHS provision in the UK, or battling health insurance and local school district funding in the US.
Imagine sitting at your kitchen table at midnight, filling out a 30-page justification report. You have to prove, on paper, that your child is disabled enough to need the device, but capable enough to use it.
It is an emotionally grueling tightrope walk for families.
It really is.
Which is exactly why the multidisciplinary team is your greatest asset. This cannot be done alone by the parents. It requires a dedicated village.
Who needs to be in that village?
Well, you need the speech-language pathologist, the SLP, to conduct the formal evaluation, determine the language layout, and write those medical justification letters. But you also desperately need the occupational therapist, the OT.
What is the OT's role in speech?
Positioning and access. If a child with severe central hypotonia is slumped over in their wheelchair because their core muscles are exhausted, their head is going to drop.
And if their head drops?
They cannot use an eye tracker. Can't even look at a communication board. The OT ensures they have the right customized seating system, the exact right physical mount to hold the device at the perfect angle, and the physical stamina to engage.
And then there's you, the parent, the carer. The sources are clear that the clinical team only sets the stage. You are the one doing the daily reinforcement.
Absolutely.
If the expensive device stays in the backpack when your child comes home from therapy, or if it only comes out for 30 minutes a day as a chore, it is not going to work.
You have to immerse them in the language. We call it modeling.
Modeling? How does that work?
When you talk to your child, you press the buttons on their device too. If you are making lunch, you say, let's eat a sandwich. And as you say it, you physically press the eat and sandwich buttons on their AAC.
Oh, I see.
You show them consistently and constantly
Yeah.
that this is how we communicate in our family. It is a massive, relentless commitment of time and energy from the carers.
And because of that massive commitment, because of the fights with insurance and the hours of modeling at the dinner table, I think it's so important to talk about what progress actually looks like.
Yeah.
Because if you are putting in that level of work, human nature dictates that you want to see results. You want your child to speak. But progress for a child with PURA syndrome is entirely nonlinear.
Very true.
It looks very, very different than typical neurodevelopment.
It requires parents to completely redefine the word milestone. If we look at the clinical tracking of progress in AAC intervention, it rarely starts with a child suddenly typing out a full, grammatically correct sentence on an iPad.
What does it start with?
It starts much, much smaller. And we have to train ourselves to recognize and honor those micro-victories.
According to the sources, progress often begins with simple vocalizations, just mumbling, making new sounds, experimenting with the breath and the vocal cords, even if it's not a recognizable word.
That is a massive neurological achievement.
Mm-hmm.
It shows they are attempting to engage in the motor plan. They're trying to push signals through those frayed wires.
What comes next?
Next, we see understanding develop long before expressive communication. You might notice they are responding consistently to spoken commands like, sit here, or they look at the door when you say, we are leaving.
That receptive language spike is the unseen foundation being poured.
Exactly. And finally, the alternative communication itself takes root. And it might start with just one intentional, purposeful button press.
Like they select eat when they're actually hungry instead of just mashing the screen.
Yes. Or profoundly, they use a symbol to describe pain.
I want to focus on that because that is perhaps the most critical milestone of all. The ability to communicate an internal state, pain, hunger, nausea, fear that a parent cannot visually see.
When a child masters the ability to say, my stomach hurts, they have gained agency over their own body.
So if you are listening to this, remind yourself to celebrate those small, meaningful milestones. Making a new sound, looking deliberately at a PECS card for an extra second, successfully selecting a symbol on a screen.
Those are monumental victories.
They are the rungs of your child's unique ladder. Do not compare their ladder to anyone else's.
And we need to celebrate them not just because it feels good to acknowledge hard work, but because the long-term implications of achieving that communication are literally life-altering.
So what does this all mean? Why is it so incredibly urgent that parents, therapists, and healthcare systems invest this massive amount of time, energy, tears, and funding into AAC as early as possible? Is it just so the child can participate in special education classes?
It is so much deeper than education or academics. If we look at the long-term natural history of PURA syndrome, as these children transition out of early childhood into puberty and eventually into adulthood, a stark and often difficult reality emerges in the literature.
What happens as they age?
The sources reveal that while these individuals are inherently loving, social, and eager to connect, they can develop significant, severe behavioral challenges as they get older.
The texts specifically mention the emergence of anxiety disorders, sensory seeking or sensory avoidance behaviors, and most distressingly for families, self-injury.
Yes, unfortunately.
We're talking about severe hand-biting, head banging against walls or floors, or extreme frustration leading to physical aggression toward caregivers.
And this raises a deeply important question.
Yeah.
Why does a friendly, affectionate, empathetic child start biting their own hand until it bleeds when they turn 14?
The core insight here, recognized by neurologists and behavioral specialists alike, is that this self-injury and aggression is very often a direct result of the sheer unbearable frustration of communication barriers.
It's the trapped voice.
Exactly. Let's put ourselves in their shoes. Imagine having a highly social mind, a rich internal emotional life, and complex teenage needs.
It's a lot to process.
Furthermore, imagine you are in physical pain, perhaps from the severe scoliosis, the hip dysplasia, or the gastrointestinal issues that are so incredibly common in PURA syndrome.
Right. You are in pain, you're anxious because your daily routine unexpectedly changed, or you are simply overwhelmed by the fluorescent lights and noise in a room.
And you have absolutely no way to tell the people who love you what is wrong. When a human mind is trapped without a voice, that distress doesn't just evaporate.
It turns inward. It boils over into physical expressions of that profound existential frustration.
I picture it like being locked in a soundproof glass box. The people you love most in the world are right outside the glass, looking in, desperately trying to guess what you need.
They are holding up a drink, they're offering a toy, they're adjusting your blanket.
But what you actually have is a splitting migraine. If you can't tap on the glass and point to your head to tell them what's hurting, eventually you're going to start hitting the glass out of sheer desperation and panic.
That is the tragic, agonizing reality of an unaccommodated communication delay, which means that we have to entirely reframe how we view AAC.
It is not just a speech therapy tool.
No, it is not just an educational aid to help them learn colors or shapes. It is profound, essential medical and psychological intervention.
By fighting for that AAC device, by doing the daily modeling, you are giving them the key to the glass box. You are giving them a way to say, stop, or my back hurts, or I'm scared of that noise.
Yes, AAC provides emotional regulation. It prevents self-harm by giving the frustration an exit route.
It preserves the mental health and the fundamental human dignity of the individual as they grow into adults. Adults who have an absolute right to exert control over their own lives, their own choices, and their own bodies.
AC is preventative medicine for the mind.
Preventative medicine. That is such a powerful, vital way to look at the iPad or the eye gaze screen sitting on the table.
It really reframes the whole effort.
We've covered an incredible amount of ground today on this deep dive. We started by looking at the deep biology, how the PURA gene mutation and the lack of the molecular postal service, the Pur-alpha protein, leads to that severe central hypotonia.
And we explored how that hypotonia frays the speaker wires of the body, creating that massive, invisible canyon between what your child understands and what they can physically articulate.
We explored how to practically bridge that canyon, starting from the physical foundations of low-tech manual signs and the cognitive mapping of PECS.
We acknowledged the immense physical hurdles of fine motor delays and dyskinesia.
And how those hurdles naturally transition a child into high-tech solutions like dynamic tablet apps and life-changing eye gaze technology.
And we learned how critically interconnected your child's body is. How a trip to the neuro-ophthalmologist to correct strabismus or myopia is literally just as important to their communication as a trip to the speech therapist.
We talked about the daily grind of implementation, the necessity of redefining progress, celebrating the micro-victories, and ultimately recognizing AAC as a vital shield, protecting the emotional and behavioral well-being of your child as they grow into adulthood.
It is undeniably a lifelong, exhausting journey, but it is a journey with a clear direction. And as we look toward the horizon, the scientific landscape of PURA syndrome is evolving at a breakneck pace.
It really is. The source material outlines that the years leading into 2026 are bringing unprecedented research advancements. We are seeing new FDA draft guidance aimed specifically at accelerating the approval path for targeted gene therapies in ultra-rare diseases.
They are focusing on plausible biological mechanisms rather than forcing rare diseases to wait for impossible, large-scale clinical trials.
There is real, tangible hope in the labs. There are innovative disease models being developed, like the CRISPR-Cas9 mouse models at the Jackson Laboratory, and ongoing preclinical validations at research institutions like the Florey.
Brilliant minds are actively looking at gene overexpression studies and targeted interventions.
Which leaves us with a truly provocative thought to carry forward as you continue this journey. If these future biological and gene-based therapies can potentially correct the production of the Pur-alpha protein in living systems,
how might that medical intervention begin to repair those frayed speaker wires? Could future therapies eventually unlock the physical motor skills and the central muscle tone needed for natural speech?
it is a scientific possibility currently being aggressively pursued across the global research landscape. But until that day comes, I want every parent and carer listening to remember this.
Every single symbol your child manages to point to, every PECS card they painstakingly hand you, and every eye gaze dwell time they learn to master is actively laying the complex neural groundwork for language in their developing brain.
They are already speaking. The music is already playing beautifully. We are simply learning how to give them the right speakers.
They are already speaking. We're just learning how to listen.
To all the parents, carers, and family members, thank you for inviting us into your world and joining us on this deep dive for the PURA Syndrome podcast. The ladder of communication might look incredibly different for your child, but every single rung is a triumph worthy of celebration.
We encourage you to reach out to the PURA Syndrome Foundation, explore their extensive resources, lean heavily on your multidisciplinary medical teams, and connect with the global community of families who truly understand.
Keep finding those new ways to be in the world with your child and keep fighting to help them find their unique, beautiful voice.